Are you on TikTok, by the way?
Only by default. So not really, no, is the answer. I have looked at some TikTok things, but I do not have it installed on my phone.
That sounds a bit guilty, as you said that. But, okay, Katharine, you've authored many books. And director of care for the family, you obviously think a lot, talk a lot about family life. What about your own family? I hear you're a granny.
I am a granny.
Yeah.
So I'm married to Richard. We live in Bristol. We have 4 adult children and 7 grandchildren now. And I agree with the person who said if they'd known that grandparenting was that much fun, they'd have had their grandchildren first.
Righto, yes. And how many children did you see? So how many children did you manage?
We have 4 children.
Okay.
3 are married, 1 is engaged.
Okay, one of them's here tonight. So
one is here tonight.
What does he think about that joke? So you'd prefer the But, okay, and you've been thinking about these things. And interestingly, you've got a number of books out, but one of them, Left to Their Own Devices, now coming into its 4th edition. I think what's really interesting is you began writing, in fact, you wrote that 10 years ago, before most other people were really getting concerned about this. So what kindled your interest at that time?
Well, I think at Care for the Family, we really try to be ahead of the game with the kind of issues that families are grappling with. And we were noticing that we were beginning to get a lot of parents asking us for help in this area. I remember one mum said, it just gets harder and harder. She said, I wish the iPhone had never been invented. So I started researching and ended up writing Left to Their Own Devices. And I think realizing that in our day, in my day, a phone was a thing that was attached to the wall with a curly cord that you sat in the hall and, played with the cord and you made a call and that was it. But now phones are devices that are shaping our relationships and changing our lives. And just building on what you've just been saying, that's why it's such an important issue.
And you must have come across kind of lots of worry or increasingly worrying sort of in your own family or in other families.
So many. And I think we spend a lot of the time just trying to help families and give them hope and give them confidence that actually parents have this. We have it in our power to enable our children, not just to get through, but to make the most of the digital age as well, because there are lots of advantages. We would not have got through the pandemic without the mobile phone. Yeah. It gives connection, it gives information, lots of things, but so many dangers. And I think the other thing is that sometimes some of the answers are a little bit closer to home, not just a list of things that we're saying to parents to do for their children, but actually to turn the mirror back on us. I remember one story, we were filming a parenting course, and I was chatting to one of the dads, and he was telling us his story. And he said that his son wanted to play football on a Saturday morning. And he said he had some very important business stuff to do on his phone. So he was checking through his emails. And his son came and said, can we go and play football? And he said, yeah, in a minute. I've just got to do these emails. He said, okay. A few minutes later, came back. Dad, can we play football? He said, no, in a few minutes. I'm still busy. Went off, came back quite a while later. Dad, you said we could play football. And this dad said he was really irritated. And he said, can't you see I'm busy? And the son just shrugged his shoulders, walked out. But just as he was walking out of the door, he just turned back and he said, you're a nicer dad without your phone. And he said it was...
that's a bit of a wake-up call for even all of us here tonight, because one of the dangers of tonight is that it's a massive kind of displacement activity on the part of the adults here, who are all here to worry about the kids, whilst we actually don't really reflect on what we're doing ourselves. So I think we need a little confession time, just between ourselves, won't go any further. But what's your personal phone kind of habit that you wouldn't want anybody to know, just between ourselves?
I have to say, very good question, Glynn. I am often disappointed by myself at the number of times that my hand just goes to my phone when I'm in the coffee queue, when I'm queuing for the loo, all kinds of times. You just find it's a sort of almost a automatic reaction. But I remember a few months ago now, our daughter was expecting a baby. It was her third, and she had a little bit of complication that meant that as soon as she went into labour, she had to go to the hospital. And so we were on call to jump in the car and to go and look after her other two children as soon as she went into labour. So I had my phone by my bed. Now, I spend most of my time saying to families, if at all possible, don't have the phone by the bed. Yeah. But I had to for this, and that was fine. The only thing was, little Noah was born, and then he was 3 months, and then he was 4 months old, and this phone was still by my bed. So that was a bad one. And then one just this weekend. So same family actually are organic farmers. They manage an organic farm. And we had apple picking on Saturday. And it was lots of fun. And then we were all having lunch, big long table. And our little granddaughter was going to be a bridesmaid. And I had seen a picture of her in her bridesmaid's dress. I got it out and I was showing her this picture. And then we started looking at something else and something else. So we have this phone at the meal table. And her father came along and just from a little way away said, Katharine, left to their own devices. Guilty as charged. So there we go.
I would echo personally a lot of that. We keep talking about the kids, but these cognitive changes apply to all of us, to many of us. Not all of us as we get older. Some people are just not interested and don't get involved in it. But I temperamentally, I'm an information addict. I have a greed for information. So of course, you know the Twitter feed is just a wonderful source of addiction for me, and I've had to deal with it. And I've had, as a Christian believer, had to bring it to God and just say, part of my faith is not to be controlled by people who live in California. They don't set the pace. They don't set the values of my life. What am I doing? And I've had to kind of undergo a little program of trying to get back control of that and withdraw from the addictive effect. So part of that means I can't have it in the bedroom. And to be honest, even if I am reading a book, I need to put the phone further away from me because I notice that it draws me physically to keep checking it. And it gives me lots of reasons. I mean, hey, that's an interesting fact I just read in the book, So maybe we should find out more information. And so I put it out of way. And interestingly, so does Jonathan Haidt. He has to move the phone out. So those of us that are talking about this, physician, heal thyself, we're doing it very often because we're struggling it ourselves, as many of us here need to go away and think about that. But, the trouble with kids, they have the double whammy. They have the double whammy of the way the phone affects them directly. Then they have the way it affects their parents, as you just shared. But you must have heard lots of stories from parents about the kind of things kids are struggling with today.
I think they conveniently come into three main categories that begin with the letter C. So the first one that I think many parents are rightly concerned about is contact. So who is it that our children are talking to? They say they're going down the road to meet Charlie that they've met online who's 15. Now we know they might not be called Charlie and they might not be 15. So the whole concern of grooming, that's the first one. And then the second one is content. So what is it that they're seeing online? So disinformation, porn, all kinds of different things. And then thirdly is conduct. So how they're behaving online. So many issues there, but one perhaps to highlight would be bullying. So in our day, the school bully generally stayed in the school playground at the end of the school day. But for today's children, through the smartphone in their pocket, they follow them home as they get on the bus, as they eat their evening meal, as they do their homework, and as that phone just pings under the duvet at night. It's 24/7. for them. So those are three areas. And then I think the thing that is the gateway to all of those that you so well described just now is social media, and the way that our children now are able to access anything, anytime.
Yeah. And I guess pornography has been a particular issue in the early days for boys, but...
Yeah, let's deal with porn first. So average age for coming across porn is 13, and generally kids aren't looking for it. It's just the right protections aren't in place. They're on another computer away from home, and they see it. And it is, it's addictive. It's becoming normal. Many children think that's where you go to learn about sex. And really shockingly, it's changing. So it's not just now photographs and films, but it's interactive. And so I read one report, and there was a child that was, involved in this interactive porn when they're sending images real time, and in the background you could hear a parent calling them to come down for tea. And shocking in the middle of family life. So porn is a big one, but other ones a little less shocking, but still very important. The sheer amount of time that our children are spending on glowing screens, often late at night. So we've heard of children setting alarms during the night so they can just check how many followers they've got, how many likes they've got. And then I had a friend who had a sleepover party for her child, which is always a misnomer, isn't it? No sleep happens on these sleepover parties. And she had not got Mother of the Year award by telling the children that they all had to put their phones in a basket in the kitchen for the night, not to take them upstairs. And in the middle of the night, she went down and she wanted a glass of water. She said these phones were going crazy. They were all lit up, all buzzing away like Blackpool illuminations. And our children don't need these things, going around their heads all night. So that would be time. And then the other thing, I think, the other danger, there are many, but one I would highlight would be their thinking. And maybe one example would be with girls and the thinking about their appearance through just watching many videos on TikTok and on Instagram. So there was a report recently of 14-year-old Nia, and she spends 3.5 hours every day watching makeup tutorials on TikTok. And another little 9-year-old girl, and the mum says, she doesn't just shove her school sweatshirt on, grab a piece of toast and run out of the house to school. She has a skincare routine at 9. And this is something I could get quite worked up about, because a lot of these Instagram influencers are celebrities who often haven't tried the product themselves, but they're being paid to promote it. And many of them are promoting skincare products. And it's the kind of skincare products that are for my sort of age skin, to deal with wrinkles. It's got acids and retinol in, and they're really unsuitable for young skin. And they're packaged in bright color packaging, and a lot of these young children are buying them because they've seen them on Instagram, and it's causing not just damage to their minds, but damage to their skin as well. So lots of things to be concerned about.
Things, 9-year-old, that's extraordinary. And that would be an example of the way escalator algorithms take a kid who just kicks off just wanting to think about cosmetics, but ends up at some...
Exactly.
And a lot of what you were concerned about there was the content of what kids see. A couple of weeks ago, Instagram announced, Meta announced that they're going to be introducing teen accounts, where there's going to be much tighter control of content. What do you think about that?
I think that's a good thing, but it's scratching the surface, I think. I think anything that can be done is good, but there's much bigger issues at stake.
Tobacco, the evidence first emerged of the link between tobacco and lung cancer in 1949. But the first steps to actually launch a public health campaign to influence people smoking, to reduce smoking, didn't come for about 14 years later. And the reason was the cigarette companies did loads of research which muddied the waters and published paper after paper, but they also did lots of little half measures just like that. Let's try filters. Let's try menthol. And on it went. And I fear that the same thing is going on here. And although it's important to produce content, nevertheless, some of those mechanisms we talked about, we need to worry about as well, I guess.
The mechanisms definitely, they're not on a level playing field. The reason this is so hard and that we're having an evening like this evening is because it's not only hard for us as adults, but it's really hard for our children, because we live in what's known as an attention economy. So the biggest commodity is no longer oil or precious metals, but it's attention, our children's attention, our attention, and the tech companies will do anything to get it. And if you think about it, there are ways that are sort of endemic, even to our phones, that draw us in. So those little 3 dots, when somebody's replying, or the tick that goes blue, or when it says, Dan is typing, and you think, what is that?
Yeah, what are they typing? Yeah.
Or the pull to refresh, the infinite scroll, that color red for the notifications, which is red for a reason, and that particular color red for a reason, is to grab our attention. Have you ever tried to put your phone to grayscale?
Never heard of it.
Grayscale, okay. There is a little way you can do it. It might be useful to try later. It's so boring. It makes it black and white. It's not as attractive at all. I tried it and then gave up because it was so boring. But so the phones themselves, then you've talked very convincingly about the algorithms already, but the way that they just give us greater extremes of content. There was that devastating case several years ago now, Molly Russell, young girl who took her life, and the coroner found that the cause of death was self-harm due to watching lots of self-harm videos of increasing nature on Instagram. And I think her father said something like, they have monetarized her misery. So the algorithms. And then the third thing, I think, the slot machine effect. So the thing that makes the most money in Las Vegas and other casinos are slot machines. And it's this cycle of anticipation and reward that causes people to pull the lever and get small variable rewards at random. And it's exactly the same thing that's harnessed for social media, but instead of money, it's our attention, as our children are just going back again and again to see if they're going to get that like or that follow, and it's called the slot machine effect for good reason.
And that itself actually was derived from psychological experiments on rats, where they discovered that rats are more likely to press the red lever if they only get a reward for doing it intermittently. And so it's the intermittent nature of the rewards that has the addictive effect. And so some people like you, some don't. Sometimes you get the follows, sometimes you don't. And so it's the variable nature of those dopamine hits, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That cause the problems.
And then you were talking more about that algorithmic self, I think?
Yeah, when we're chatting about this, the psychologists are talking about something called the algorithmic self. And if you think, most of us build our sense of who we are, what our strengths are, weaknesses, what our temperament seems to be. We build it up through our teenage years, through interaction with the world, listening to what other people say about us, finding out how the world operates, and then making up our own minds. And it's this interaction going on. But as we're drawn into the virtual world, we're now building our identity as teenagers from what the algorithms feed to us. And of course, given the confirmation bias algorithms I was talking about, what they feed to us is simply what they're learning about our beliefs already. So the self is simply built on exaggerated, repeated versions of itself in this information bubble. And we're in uncharted territory about what this means for kids as they then have to go out into the big world and navigate that. So, these mechanisms really interesting, aren't they? And the bottom line for all this, as we were saying, our kids are left, empty, anxious, like rats, checking their phone. And
it's the first, I think, we have a generation for the first time ever who has a number allocated to their worth.
Yeah.
The number of likes they have in social media. It's hard for them.
Yeah. I think you did remind us that, there's baby and bathwater here right at the beginning. Bathwater, as we say where I come from, there's no R in it, right? Bathwater. Babies and bathwater. And there is a baby. There are some wonderful gifts, wonderful things that our phones do for us anyway, aren't there? Tell us a little bit about.
Well, in terms of the good things, I was going to ask you actually about the this quote that I read from. See if you can think who said this. Okay, information overload is confusing and harmful to the mind.
I do know because I've read your book. Well, you better tell everybody else.
Yeah, well, you would have thought, wouldn't you, that it was Jonathan Haidt or somebody.
Somebody like
but it was a Swedish polymath who wrote that at the time of the Renaissance, and he wrote it because of the concern about the printing press and how the imagined effect on our mind and on information overload. So I think there has always been pushback against new technology. But I think for all the reasons that we've just been saying, this is different.
Yeah, but there are some good things. Just remind us of those blessings.
The blessings. Okay, so I would say connection with people all around the world. Information at the swipe of a screen.
Yeah.
You can find out the date of the Battle of Hastings for your history homework, the rugby, cricket, football score, whatever. Children with additional need, there is a lot of a real help for them if they're harder to make relationships face to face. Sometimes doing things online can be a real blessing. Pandemic, we really could not have managed without it. We moved our lives online, didn't we? And then I think also for teenagers, it's the time, puberty is a time when they're trying to establish their identity away from us, their parents, and technology enables them to do that much more easily.
Yeah, there's some fantastic. They're not going to go away, these things. I don't think the answer is just banning everything. And certainly, it's banished marital disputes from our household for good because we now don't have to read maps, and so G-maps is.
Well, you say that. I manage frequently to put the wrong postcode in. So that does cause...
There are problems. So there are lots of blessings, but there's a baby there that we don't want to throw out, but there's a lot of bathwater. Katharine, give us your top 5 tips for a mum or dad here who wants to say, how do we as a family, or maybe there's a younger person here who needs to go home and talk to mum and dad about their phone habits. What are we going to do about this as a family? Give us your top 5.
Top 5 tips. Okay. Well, firstly, I think I just want to say that there is hope, and as parents particularly, we're the biggest influence on our children's lives. We have everything to play for in this. So be confident. There is so much that we can do. There's a challenge, but actually there is a lot of hope. So number 1, I would say be intentional. Put boundaries in place in the home on time on screens, where and when screens can be used. I think if you do that, it's really good to involve children in the discussion. But if you do that, you need to draw up another chair to the table because that chair will be occupied by everybody else's parent. Because you will be told everybody else's parent lets them have a smartphone to take to preschool, lets them play Fortnite till 3 a.m. The night before their GCSE maths exam or whatever. But I think for parents to have confidence that they are the parents, they love their child the most, they know them the best. And it's not always going to be popular. It's exhausting. It might take getting a bit of a hit in the popularity stakes, but it's worth it because boundaries are about security. So that would be number one, be intentional.
And I suppose just related to that parents taking control thing or being prepared to, you can be helped by, and there are movements now where parents are banding together.
Absolutely.
And together saying, we're going to delay giving our kid a phone until age 14 because it's much easier. If it's difficult when you say, you're not having it until you're 14, and they say, but everybody's got them, as you say. But it's easier if you say you can't have one until they're 14. They say, oh, well, but some other kids have got them. And you say, well, tough, you're one who's not. So those, and I know several schools now, and there is a movement that was born on Mumsnet that gets this going. Mums band together, and it's something a church really ought to be doing as parents get together, isn't it?
No, absolutely. And that actually is the second point. Be together.
Right.
Be together. Be together. If you're parenting together, no good, mum saying you can't play on that game because it's 18 and you're only 15, and then dad coming in and saying, oh, come on, let's have a go, or whatever. Yeah. Be on the same page. If you're co-parenting, so if parents are separated and the child is in one home for half the week and the other home for the rest of the week, it's so hard, and family life's complicated, but where possible, try and have some consistency. And then, like you said, Glynn, be together with other parents. There's such power in that. The smartphone-free childhood movement began with two mums who tried to set up a WhatsApp group to delay giving their child a smartphone. Didn't really go anywhere. Then one of them posted on Instagram and it went viral. And now there are groups all over the country of parents trying to just delay having a smartphone. So be together would be number two. Number three is be an example. We've talked a little bit about that already. But that's, it's tough. We think our children aren't listening. We tell them to hang up their coat, we come in and it's still on the floor, and we think they don't listen, but they don't miss a thing, and they take their cue from us. So if they see us come in from work and the first thing we do is go on our phone, if we're, all they see is the back of the phone, they don't know what we're doing on it. We might be looking up a recipe to cook for their evening meal, we might be fixing up a play date for them, or we might be scrolling through pictures of cats. They don't know, it's all the back of the phone to them. So be an example, and then be positive. There's so much good that we can do. We can use technology in the family. So we could, one dad, he said they like to go out for a walk on a Saturday, and he would say to the boys, put your coats on, put your phones away, we're going out for a walk. And they were, oh, we don't want to go, moan. I said, everything changed when we changed tack. And so now we say, pick up your coats, pick up your phones, we're going out. And they take selfies and make little videos, and they use technology. Now, Minecraft and Roblox may not be your activity of choice, but being interested in their gaming in the same way that we might be interested in their Lego or sport or ballet or whatever else, that can be a really positive thing. So be positive. And then finally, and this is my top tip, and it's in the little booklets here they've been beautifully made. It's in there, page 20. It's something called a family media agreement. Now, this just means that you get together with your family, whatever shape, whatever size, and you talk about what your ground rules are for technology in the home. And you can make it a fun activity, get some snacks and some drinks, and even the most uncommunicative teenager will take part if they think they're going to be listened to, if they've got some skin in the game. And the deal is everybody agrees, even the parents. And it's worth having it age appropriate. So what's appropriate for a 6-year-old, not so maybe for a 16-year-old, and working out what the consequences are if someone slips over the line, and also just making some positives, so it's not all negative. But it could be where and when you use technology. Do you have phones at the meal table? Do you have phones in the bedroom? You can buy those multi-chargers, and everyone can put their phones in those at night and put them outside the bedroom on the landing. What do they do if they come across something scary when did they get their first smartphone? What social media sites are they allowed on? The world is your oyster. And this is it's not a straitjacket. It's not trying to limit their freedom, but it is a safety belt to keep everybody safe. And it's a really good thing to do. And you don't have to write it down and stick it on the fridge. Sometimes just talking about it is enough. But that would be my top tip, I think.
And you mentioned a dad earlier. Is it hard to get dads involved in this?
Well, it can be. Interestingly, we at Care for the Family, we go around the country doing tours of parenting events. And the events that we do on social media, we get more dads actually than we do for our other parenting events. But yeah, if it's a dad and mum involved, if you can work together, it's really powerful.
Well, it sounds. And so I was out at a city firm that invited me along one lunchtime to talk to the staff about some of these issues. Most folk there were in their 20s, early 30s. There were a couple of older guys on the front row. And one of them, I stopped for questions. And we took a few questions from the 20-somethings. And then they didn't say anything, these older, by older I mean 40s.
Not that old then.
Not that old, no, but older than everybody else there, you know. And I just asked, before I stopped this question time in the middle, I just said to these guys, you guys, do you have any, questions particularly? And one of them said, well, I'm a dad. We've got a 14-year-old daughter. Well, she's the oldest. And he said, to be honest, I'm not interested in asking any questions. I need you to get to the answers, he said, in this talk, because we lost our 14-year-old about a year ago to her phone, just to her phone. He says she comes home, she doesn't want to engage with the family, she disappears up to her room after she's had supper, and we don't know what she's getting up to in there. And we feel we've lost her from the family. It's quite moving. And what would you say to that, Dad? Because it might be tempting to say, well, the horse has bolted. Has it?
No.
Is it all over?
Never too late. It's hard, but I would say it's never too late. And I would say try connecting with her on things that she does enjoy, rather than just focusing on the phone issue in the bedroom. We used to do a little thing, taking one of our children, they could choose which one of us they could go with, but one of us took one of them out to breakfast to Tesco's on a Saturday morning because we found we didn't get that one-to-one time. And it had actually been happening for a while before I realised I really didn't get a look in. I didn't get to go. And I made a few inquiries to find out why. I think most of us mums are a bit more insecure than we'd like to admit. And the reason I discovered was that when I took them for breakfast, they had Weetabix and orange juice. And when Richard, my husband, took them, they appeared to be having chocolate eclairs and cheese and and Coca-Cola.
I'm not surprised. I know Richard.
It wasn't about healthy eating. It was about a moment. And normally we talked about, the latest Aston Villa score or the hair braid or something, nothing of significance. But every now and then we could connect on a real heart issue. And so I would say to that dad, try that, find things where they want to be with you. Begin there, begin small and build it up from there.
And just before we leave these top 5, I mean, you were talking in there about getting our kids out into the real world. Are you a Kirsty Allsop type of mum? For those, Kirsty Allsop was investigated very recently by social services who rang her up after she'd let it be known that she'd allowed her 15-year-old son, Oscar, to go around on a kind of cross-Europe trip with his friend who was just 16. So, are you a Kirsty or what do you think?
By default, I would be the helicopter parent. I really would.
Really?
I would, I love to know. I think every parent wants to know their children are safe. We want to make things easy for them. But I know that actually the way to build resilience in their lives is to allow them, maybe, little by little, rather than the whole 9 yards straight off, but to allow them more adventure, more risk. This whole thing about this world is anti-fragile. So things that get strengthened through stress. So the banking system, our bones, our immune system. And actually that's how our children learn resilience. So I have to choose to do it, but allowing them that little bit of risk and adventure is a really good thing.
And it means doing the business yourself. You don't have to worry a little and, will they coming home and will they be here? And it is quite stressful, but tough on us because we owe it to our kids, don't we, to give them this chance to develop in relationship to the real world. So
we always say, I say, we're not bringing up children, we're not even bringing up teenagers, we're bringing up adults, adults who can make wise choices when we're not there. And that's particularly relevant to technology, but that whole of life.
Actually, I suppose that's a better way of thinking about introducing our kids to phones. They're going to be using them. They're not going to go away. People love banning things. We think the answer is to ban it. It isn't to ban. The answer is to prepare. And one of my little sayings is smartphones need smart kids. We need our kids to be prepared to have a phone in the same way as we prepare them to drive a car. You don't get to drive a car before your frontal lobes are developed sufficiently to make that safe when you're 18. And similarly, here, you need to learn how to handle this thing wisely and learn that it's both your friend, it's also your enemy. And smart kids know the difference between the two. And I think it's a real opportunity for us to say to our kids, dare to be different. You don't have to be mastered and controlled by people in California. You find your way of being a full human being.
And helping them do that while they're in our home, rather than when it's too late.
Exactly,
I would say.
Rather than when and just like organizations or parents banding together for our kids not to be given phones, there are also parent groups now banding together to support one another in letting our kids have free play again and go wild and discover what the world is like. And there is a website, Let Grow, which gives lots of tips on that. It's an American site, but lots of transferable information there. So we've talked about children, young people. Now, what about if they're older teens here or adults, people like you and me, who feel we've got some business to do here. We are addicted. Our phone is occupying too big a space in our life. What would be your tips there?
Oh, okay. I think I would say, self-awareness is a good thing. So if we're aware of that is a really good start.
Yeah.
There are things that we can. I think it depends on our personality as well. But if we're the kind of person that's quite boundaried, we could make choices. So we decide we won't have the phone by our bed at night. We'll turn it off at 10 o'clock. There's an author called Andy Crouch, and he talks about parenting your phone. So in the same way as a parent would put their child to bed and tell them when they were going to get up, do the same with your phone. But if that's too hard, you can do things like delete certain apps or even move them. I've moved my social media and my emails I've got an Apple phone, so right on a screen a long way away. So it's not on my home screen, so I'm not tempted to look at them. So that's one thing. I would
turn off notifications.
Do the grayscale that I mentioned, Elu.
But you put yours back on.
Oh, I did. It was so. And then be accountable to somebody and do small steps. It's if we try and do the whole 9 yards, generally straight off, it will be like a New Year's resolution to suddenly get fit and eat healthily and do the whole thing by the 5th of January. And by the 1st of February, we've failed. So little steps and being accountable to somebody.
I think that's quite a good point about coming clean, being accountable. The problem with self-awareness is you can get stuck in self-awareness. I'm great at self-awareness, but then doing nothing about it. I know there's a problem, but I'm not yet ready to actually do something. So I think getting into an accountability relationship over this can be a really good thing, can't it? I suppose we should come into our landing zone now. And I finish my talk by saying we're in a church, people of faith, and your Christian faith, I know, is important to you. Do you think people of faith should be especially worried about this?
Such a good question, Glynn. I think we should all be worried because this is about human flourishing, and I believe we're all made in the image of God. But I think as people of faith, it's worth realizing that this is actually part of our spiritual formation. The influences on our lives shape us spiritually and influence the people that we're becoming. And so there's a word called technoference, new word, and it's when a technology gets in the way of a relationship. So if I had my phone here on the table, that would be in the way of our conversation. And I think our phones can for me anyway, get in the way of my relationship with Jesus, definitely. So that would be the first thing. Secondly, I think this again, personally, it can numb me and distract me very easily from thinking about the important issues and the challenging things and the painful things in life. So that could be a distraction. But I think the biggest thing for all of us, maybe, it's about identity. And I believe we all need to know who we are, that we matter, and that we have something to contribute to the world. And I mean, for me, a belief in a God who made me and gives me all these things and loves us, loves our children unconditionally. So we don't have to create an online identity because we know who we are as children of God who are loved unconditionally. And so that's why I think that's so important, to get our identity from that knowledge and not from what Google says about us or Instagram or any other manner of things.
And that's what, as I finished by saying earlier, that's what drives my interest in this area too. I'm really interested in identity and the process of identity formation. And, this culture of self-invention, to burden a child with the task of making herself up every day, all over again. This freedom, you can be anything you want to be. Well, if you can be anything you want to be, what will you be? How do you choose? And at the same time, we bombard them with images that tell them how they really ought to be or could be, fuse them in this way. And so for me, I think this idea of being part of a story bigger than myself, where that's God's big story, I think it dramatically gives a sense of being loved, which is profoundly important for the human soul, isn't it? And I think beyond that, this sense of being forgiven. A friend of mine was saying to me once, what is your God? What can he do for me? And I said, forgiveness? I didn't mean it judgmentally. That's most important to me, forgiveness. That stuff dealt with. The fantastic place of cross in this story where sins are covered and dealt with. I think that's, again, a profound psychological significance and creates a ballast in the soul. And then, of course, the way it brings meaning and purpose and organizes the self and challenges us to organize ourselves around a purpose that isn't all about ourselves, but wonderfully involves us and calls us and authorizes us and gifts us to get on and make the difference that only we can make in God's world. And I think that's a wonderful, motivation. I think that drives both of us.